The meeting, it should all stand for pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, today is Tuesday, March 21st, commission meeting, being held at, obviously, 11 Hazen Drive. Public entitled to attend all commission meetings and when recognized by the chairman. The public may speak on any item on the agenda. The chairman reserves the right to limit public comments to the extent necessary for the orderly conduct of the meeting. One of my things is, if you are called on to speak, please stand, state your full name and where you're from. First item I'm going to call for is the approval of the February 21st commission minutes.
Move to approve.
I'll second.
Moved and approved. Any discussion? Not hearing any. Minutes are approved. Second is the consent agenda. The following items are grouped together and noticed as consent agenda items to expedite action on routine matters, which may not require public discussion. Commission members may remove certain items if further public input or discussion is deemed necessary. Item number 2A, approval to accept the following donations totaling $8,600 made to the search and rescue account. From Paul and Patricia Bissett, $5,000. Christian Foreman and Angela Toms, $2,000. Marion Hawk, $1,000. Golden Child Black Lake Nationals and Vintage Showdown Association, $300. Jennifer Pacos, $200. Marvin Schwartz, $100 for a total of $8,600. Item 2B, approval to accept the following donations totaling $600 made to the Let's Go Fishing program. Frank DeBis Jr. from Manchester, $100. Jennifer Toccazzolo from New Boston, Hampshire, $500. Made in memory of Ernie Lapierre, North Kingston, Rhode Island, for a total of $600. Item 2C, approval to accept a donation in the amount of $1,000 from David and Grace Mann, Merrimack, New Hampshire, to be utilized by the Voter Access Program. Item 2D, approval to accept a donation in the amount of $2,000 from the Meredith Rotary Club, Meredith, New Hampshire, to be utilized for inland fishery management, specifically the Large Lakes Program. Item 2E, approval to accept the following donations totaling $145 in memory of Burnside Bernie Bartlett of Georges Mills, New Hampshire, to be deposited into the small gifts and donations account. That'd be from Teresa Smanak, White River Junction, Vermont, for $20. Cynthia and Howard Anderson, West Springfield, New Hampshire, $25. Raymond Legassi from Legassi Family Trust, Lebanon, New Hampshire, $50. And Peter Elder, George Mills, New Hampshire, for $50, for a total of $145. Item 2F, approval to accept a $5 donation from Brian Pierce, Concord, New Hampshire, to be deposited into the small gifts and donation account earmarked for non-game use. Item 2G, approval to accept a donation in the amount of $50 from Cynthia Mooney, Hillsborough, New Hampshire, in memory of Ted Redfield, Nelson, New Hampshire, to be deposited into the small gifts and donation account. Item 2H, approval to accept a donation in the amount of $100 from the Friends of the Kimball Library, Atkinson, New Hampshire, for their appreciation of Bobcat presentation given at the Kimball Library to be deposited into a small gifts and donation account. I'll entertain a motion to accept items 2A through 2H.
So moved.
A motion from Commissioner
I'll
Temple, seconded by DeRosa. Any discussion? All in favor? Motion moves. Motion passes. Next one, an informational item, a financial statement. I don't see the,
I'm right here.
oh, I'm sorry.
Hi.
You're
My
hiding.
apologies, but due to the unanticipated absence of an employee, my current workload has not allowed me to be able to produce the February financial statement. I'm sorry. I will get to it when I can.
I'll let you slide.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item 2, the Wildlife Division will provide a presentation on hounding. Before that starts, this will be kept civil. I don't want to see a bunch of people jumping up, yelling and screaming. If it gets out of hand, I'll shut this meeting down. Dan, please start.
Thank you very much. A number of meetings ago, there was a request made for the Wildlife Division to give a presentation on hound hunting. So Andy Timmons, who's our game program supervisor and former, and I guess acting bear project leader, will give the first portion of the presentation. He'll go over some of the background, history, species that are that you can hound hunt in the state, some of the information that we collect, how it's used for management, particularly with a focus on bears. And then we'll have Will Stats, who is retired but was a biologist with the department for 27 years. He now is still a contract biologist with the Wildlife Management Institute. And he'll give, he is a hound hunter, so he'll be able to speak to the actual practice of hound hunting. Will lives in Vermont and hound hunts in Vermont, but still comes back to New Hampshire to deer hunt, I think, because for obvious reasons our higher quality deer population here in New Hampshire than in Vermont. So, with that, I'll hand it off to Will, or Andy and Will.
Okay. Well, thank you. Good afternoon. As Dan mentioned, this is at a request of the commission to talk about hound hunting in New Hampshire. And really, you know, this presentation will focus on the use of pursuit hounds for hunting in New Hampshire. So it's going to focus on the breeds of larger hounds as well as beagles, which are primarily used to hunt mammals. There certainly are dogs used to hunt birds, grouse, woodcock, waterfowl. Those tend to be more pointing, flushing, and retrieving style dogs. They are not the focus of this presentation today, but perhaps could be in the future. And there's probably people in the commission that could speak more intelligently about those breeds than myself. But just to kick this off, just talk a little bit about the history of man hunting with dog. And it's not crystal clear how long it's been going on, but I can tell you it's been a long time. And it dates back to the time when man domesticated the dog, you know, some 20 to 30,000 years ago. And dogs, you know, dogs were descendants of wolves, and they were domesticated by man primarily for the purpose of acquiring food. So certainly when you think of old hounding practices in countries like England, you think of the big fox hunts with hounds. And that was really an activity designated for the wealthy and the elite. Hound hunting, you know, when the use of hounds for hunting became popular in North America, dates roughly back the same time. But certainly there was an influx in the 1600s when people from Europe began to come to North America to colonize North America. They brought dogs with them. So although it was a practice that was already present with the early settlers of North America, certainly saw an influx in the 1600s. And hound hunting and specific hound hunts have been written about in different popular magazines going back to the 40s. That cover, That Outdoor Life, is from March 1943, and it told a story about a bear and hound hunt out west. And then there's classic books that have been written on hounds and the connection between people and hounds, and Where the Red Fern Grows is a great example. That's a story of a boy who grew up in the Ozarks, who had a real desire to get his own red-bone coon dogs, and that book is actually based on the author Wilson Rawls' childhood in the Ozarks. So there are aspects of hound hunting that have been identified as being beneficial, and these include wildlife population control, individual hunter satisfaction, as well as community benefit. And community benefit primarily comes through the form of controlling wildlife populations at socially acceptable levels. There's also sociological values, and these include tradition and heritage. This activity is very strong in both tradition and heritage. Companionship and community, certainly the bond that forms between man and his dog is very strong, as well as challenge of sport. And hound hunters assist in wildlife research, wildlife conflict and damage management, as well as invasive species control. Thankfully, that's not really an issue here in New Hampshire, but as you move into the southern parts of the U.S., feral hogs are a problem, and hounds are used to help control those populations. So in New Hampshire, it is legal to hunt various mammals with dogs, and these include bears, coyote, raccoon, fisher, fox, gray squirrel, cottontail rabbits, as well as snowshoe hare. And we also see hunting clubs form. People who enjoy these sports tend to group together. They form hunting clubs, but these clubs become much more than just a hunting club. And I use the New Hampshire Bear Hunters Association for example. That's the one club in the state dedicated to hound hunting with bears, and just something. They've partnered with the agency in different ways. They're helpful to bear-human conflict abatement. They've purchased electric fences. We've trained them on deploying these electric fences, and they're on the front lines helping us mitigate conflicts between bears and people. They also sponsor students to Berry Conservation Camp each summer, and they also give a financial donation to the Killam Bear Center, our in-state facility for rehabilitating orphan cubs. And there's also I believe the number still stands at 5, but there's approximately 5 in-state beagle clubs who also have similar interests. These clubs are about sharing their experiences and kind of promoting their sport. An example is, a few years back, some people associated with Dartmouth College reached out to the agency saying, hey, we have students that are interested in learning about hound hunting. They own a large tract of land in northern New Hampshire, so they reached out asking for if we knew of anybody who might be willing to share the experience of hunting snowshoe hare with dogs with students. And we were able to find somebody who was very interested in that, and this has been, I think this last winter was about the 3rd winter in a row that's been going on, and it's been very popular. So again, these houndsmen are very much about sharing the activities that they love and trying to, just show the public, how these hunts go. Very outgoing in that regard. Laws and rules. There are quite a few state laws as well as department rules that regulate the use of dogs in hunting. I'm not going to take the time to go through all these, some of them are pretty lengthy, but I just want to impress upon you the fact that this is really a very highly regulated activity in New Hampshire. And each fall we conduct a small game hunter survey of hunters asking about their effort in their flush rates, those type of things related to small game hunting. But we also, in that survey, asked people whether or not they hunt with a dog. So that number you're seeing, that number after the end, that reflects total hunter hours, so a measure of effort. And what we see is, when it comes to species, although I promised not to talk about grouse and woodcock hunting, it's worth mentioning that, grouse in particular, it's the species in the state that is most hunted with dogs, and a lot of effort is put into that. And to a lesser extent, the same for woodcock. But both of those species, most people who are actively hunting those birds are using a dog. But when you look at the different mammals, snowshoe hare jumps out. If you look at the effort, there's certainly a lot less people hunting snowshoe hare than grouse. But most people who are hunting hare are using beagles. As far as squirrel and rabbit, not many people are using dogs for those activities. And by rabbit, I'm referring to cottontail rabbit. And you can see by that low hours of 71, it's not the most sought after small game species, which relates to its distribution in the state. For bear, kind of switch gears and focus on bear a little bit. To hunt bear with dogs in New Hampshire, you need a permit that allows you to do that. And there's a few reasons for this. The hunting of bears with dogs is certainly more regulated compared to the smaller game species for a few reasons. One, it's a high-profile activity. It's a big game species. We know that without regulations, there'd be a lot of people from other states that would want to come to New Hampshire to hunt bears with hounds, and we have a state law related to reciprocity that determines who can and who can't. But point being is, if you accumulate all the total bear harvest by the three methods, we're talking annual bear harvest of over 1,000 animals. So when you have that level of harvest on a species like bear, it is having a strong influence on that population level, which is what the intent of one of the intents of harvest is. The point being is with many of these smaller game species, the harvest level is lower. Also, there are a lot of factors that are influencing those population levels besides harvest, mainly habitat conditions and habitat availability. So that's one reason why bear is much highly more regulated compared to the other species. But the other benefit of this permit is it allows us to say something about hunter effort. In the absence of this permit, we could tell you how many bears are taken with hounds each year, but we could not tell you how many people attempt to take bears with hounds each year. So the green line on the bottom is the number of permits issued each year to allow people to take bears with hounds. And you can see it's considerably lower compared to permits issued to hunt bear with bait, and it's also been very steady over time. So we estimate that we have about 30 to 35 individuals in the state that own bear hounds, and on any given year, these people may take up to 250 to 300 people out. Because their effort is lower compared to baiting and even still hunting, as well as it's been steady over time, that is why hound hunter harvest each year makes up the smallest portion of the total bear harvest. Typically it's around 10 to 12%. And that really hasn't changed. Now I'm going to switch gears and talk a little bit about training on wildlife with dogs. In New Hampshire, if there's a species that can be hunted but has a closed season during part of the year, you're allowed to train on those animals during that closed period. So some examples would be bear as an example, fox would be an example, raccoon. So in order to be able to do that, you're required to have a permit that allows you to train on those different species. And on the permit, there's a checkoff there, so you indicate which species that you are choosing to train on. So they include bear, game birds, fox, rabbit, hare, raccoon, and then there's a place for other. And what we generally see inserted into other is people who are training on fisher and people who are training on coyotes. But again, one of the values of a permit is it gives you some data on effort. In the absence of this permit, we wouldn't have much of an idea of how many people are participating in this activity. So if you look at the data over the last 5 years for these different species, and this data is reflecting the number of training permits issued, look, I'll start with grouse because we know how popular grouse hunting with dogs are. It's also very popular from a training perspective. The orange line there is pretty high, but even the effort put into training on bear, as well as rabbit hare and raccoon, are relatively similar to the effort that we see put into training on grouse. But all this effort is much higher than some of these other species, including fox, coyote, fisher, and squirrel. And the other takeaway here is we really haven't seen much fluctuation in this over the last several years. It's pretty steady. We have a core group of people who own hounds, who like to hunt with hounds, like to train with hounds, and it doesn't seem to be an influx or much loss in those people. It's been a very steady population. And I'm just going to finish by, I kind of touched on it, but the importance of, because we have people in the state that own trained bear dogs, we've leaned on them over the years for some different reasons, particularly related to bear research. We've used houndsmen to catch bears that we need to remove radio collars from. And we also call on these folks to assist in bear conflict mitigation. Hounds are not the right tool in every conflict mitigation by any means, but they are another tool in the toolbox that we do utilize. So now I'm going to turn it over to Will Stats and let him share his experience as a houndsman. Push that out.
Good afternoon. How's everybody doing? I appreciate the commission letting me come over from the other state over there across the river. Didn't know how well I'd be received here, Vermonter. And the hound hunting, as Andy and Dan pointed out, that I do is in Vermont. And so I got into this, back in 1980. My very first wildlife job that I had was in the state of Vermont capturing black bear families. And the method that we used, as Andy has pointed out, was hounds. And I had been a hunter and trapper all my life, my short life at that point anyways, kind of gotten long now. But so I had dabbled a little bit with hounds back where I grew up in central Vermont, a little bit of raccoon hunting and a little bit of bobcat hunting. I didn't own any hounds, but that changed when I began to work for the department for Vermont Fish and Wildlife in 1980 on this bear project. And developed an appreciation of these beautiful animals, and both the bears and the dogs, and decided that this was something that I wanted to add to the many other outdoor activities I do. So I'm going to take you folks through, and my apologies to folks in the room, including the commission, that are familiar with hound hunting. I'm going to assume that nobody knows anything about it. So that's kind of the way I'm going to take this step by step of what we do and why we do it and how we do it. And my only challenge today is not to talk too much, because I could talk about hounds and hunting for a long, long time. I will point out one thing, and I was talking to Dan and Andy about this before I started. None of us ever refer to this as hounding. That's a relatively new term, and to my mind it's a derogatory term. I'm hounding somebody, I'm bothering somebody. We grow, with all the work that I've done with hounds and so forth, we never talked about we're going hounding. That's not, no, we're going to hunt our hounds, we're going to run our hounds, we're going to hunt something with hounds. We never talk about hounding. So that's just a little point there. So anyways, this is Tilly. This is where it all starts. It all starts with the puppy. And for most of us, it starts with a puppy. And so there are various breeds that are used. This is a Plott hound. They were brought over in the 1700s, Plott. They were brought to North Carolina and was sort of the genesis of the Plott breed. There was some breeding done and so forth. So very often hound hunters, men and women, will start with some known breeding that they know that is a good genetic line, and they'll either buy a puppy or breed their own dogs to get a puppy. And there are some folks that don't have the time to raise a puppy, and they will buy what we call started dogs. They might buy a dog from out west or from another known breeder in New England or whatever. So a started dog that they can immediately start hunting with. But the enjoyment is, or a lot of the enjoyment for me anyways, is to start with a puppy and to see their potential. And it's really hard to, I'm sure dog owners in here, how to pick the perfect puppy. You know, we don't ever know what's the perfect puppy, but so it's sort of a gut thing. But with any luck at all, you know, you can make out pretty good. So again, my hounds are Plott hounds. They're very courageous. They're very friendly. They make great pets. In fact, I consider my dogs pets. I love them to death, and that's going to be a common theme that I'll sort of try to emphasize here. The good thing about, so, you know, Andy mentioned the training season, and the training season is important for us hound hunters because it takes tremendous commitment and time to raise these animals to do what you need them to do, to develop them to their full potential. So a lengthy training season is key. And how we do that, the one thing that with hounds, of course I threw this picture in, you know, we're thinking about what a hound looks like. We look at their conformation, we look at their feet, we look at how their legs are shaped and so forth. We're trying to pick out that form of hound that we want. But it takes a long time to develop an eye for this, and it takes a long time to train these animals. The good thing about hounds is that they learn by going with other hounds. That if they've got that instinct and you've got good breeding, so that's what we do. We put these young puppies in with these older hounds, and hopefully they pick up what they're supposed to pick up. And it's sort of a repetitious type of thing. We've got to go many days, and that's, again, the benefit of a lengthy training season. Now, in the absence of having some older dogs for a pup to go with, what you have to do is put that puppy onto the game that you want it to run and encourage it, and hopefully it picks up on it and develops that sense of that's what it wants to run, because they're bred to run the game, and it's your job as the hound owner, one, is to be smarter than the hound, and often that's not the case, and two, is make sure it's on the game that you want it to run. Now, one thing I'm going to talk about a little more detail is some of the technology we have today, and these are GPS collars. I'm going to get to that shortly, but this is also a Tritronics training collar as well. So this has some training features on it that has been extremely helpful for us for training hounds, and in fact training any dog. It has some tone features on it so that you can encourage good behavior and discourage bad behavior, and the main thing too, and we'll talk about this in a few minutes, is the ability to get our hounds back. So that's something I'll touch upon. So hound hunters, you'll find that real dedicated hound hunters, or men and women that hunt hounds, have to have a really good, solid informational base in their heads of what the game that they pursue, the habitats that they're found in, the foods that they like. You just can't go out anywhere to find whether you're on bears or bobcats or raccoons. So in my case, what I do over in Vermont is bobcats. And bobcats like very thick cover with abundant prey, and they also like ledges. They also like that type of stuff. So what I have found over the years, I was blessed when I started with Vermont Fish and Wildlife, when I was working on that black bear research project. And by the way, we caught about 100 bears, including cubs, during the 5 years that we did that study. Caught them with hounds, put tags on them, released them unharmed. And that's, as Andy was saying, hounds have been used for many research projects. Subsequent to that, I've worked on a number of research projects that involved hounds. And they're used all over the world, actually, for catching big cats, jaguars, mountain lions, animals of that nature. So the hound hunters that I worked with back in the 1980s, they had an incredible knowledge base of where bears were found. I mean, they knew the countryside, they knew the geography, and that was so key to being able to be a successful hounds person, is you've got to know, we all know that, to be a successful hunter of any sort, you got to know something about what you're pursuing. But it's really doubly important with hounds because, you can waste a lot of time looking for where they're not at, what you're pursuing. And so it's critical that you have a good feel for what the habitat and the type of foods that these animals are eating at different times of the year. And the whole notion is we want to find a track, and of whatever we're pursuing, obviously. You know, that's important to us. And because we can't have a hunt if we can't find a track, right? So, so that's the first, you know, once we've got our dogs that they're keyed into this species, the first thing, the key thing that we're trying to do in these hunts is to find a track. And what you folks maybe in the room have seen often is bear hunters with their dogs up on the boxes, driving around, looking to air scent for a bear. And that's known as rigging. And generally the dog that's on top of that box is known as the striped dog. They're usually the most valuable dog, the most experienced, and the dog that is going to alert the other dogs that I've smelled a bear. In my case, being a bobcat guy, I'm generally on snowy roads. I'm looking for tracks where the cats had crossed the road. And barring that, I'll walk long distances on snowshoes, making big loops, looking for tracks. And some days I'll have snowshoed 10 miles before I even find a track. So, and in the case of bear hunters, and for that matter raccoon hunters, if they know where food sources are, they don't always just find tracks off rigging off the truck. They'll walk into oak stands, they'll walk into beech stands, they'll walk into old apple orchards. So there's a lot of walking involved, just trying to find a track. And again, I have the benefit of snow, seeing where the track is, but so as I said, sometimes we'll walk 8-10 miles, big loops in these big cedar swamps or big remote swamps looking for a track. And as do bear hunters occasionally as well. So the notion is that when you have a track, the dog hopefully is going to bark on that track. So, but here's where some of the selectivity comes into play. Now, not to throw a lot of terms at you here, but we kind of categorize dogs as either cold-nosed or hot-nosed. And so a cold-nosed hound can smell a very old, cold track and can take a track that's many hours old, versus a hot-nosed dog will only smell a track that's very hot, that the animal has been there very relatively recently. So on top of that, so as we find a track, we want to gauge what the age of that track is, and our dogs can tell us that to some degree. But this is where the selectivity comes into that with hound hunting, is we're going to evaluate that track. We're going to say, okay, is this track a sow with cubs? Is this a kitten? Is this track, and I always talk about the 3 R's, the right track in the right place at the right time. And that's what we're thinking about. So a lot of evaluation, and you know, we often, hound people will say, look, our sport, our way of life is, when we're doing this, is very selective. And this is the first place we make the selectivity. We have a track, we're going to evaluate it. Even on bare ground, we can look and see what that track is. And is it going in the right place? Is it going in a safe place? Is it an age that we can catch up to it? Is our dogs indicating that they can catch up to it? So this is the sort of the thought process that goes through our mind when we're dealing with that. First, we've got to find that track, then we're going to evaluate that track. And that's where the selectivity comes into play. So the next thing is, obviously, if it's a track that we've decided to run, we're going to probably release the striped dog first, the dog that's most experienced, and to evaluate the track and wait till that dog, what we call, opens, and that means it barks. It's indicating that it's going to be able to follow that track. Once we do that, other dogs are added. Now, I use no more than 3 dogs for bobcats over in Vermont, and most frequently 2, and I've used 1 many times. Andy will tell you that here in New Hampshire it's legal to have 6 dogs, Andy, for bears. Most guys don't generally run 6. They'll run 3 or 4, but if they've got a puppy, that gives them ability to put a puppy in as well. And with bear dogs, you know, with a lot of the time it's the first 1 or 2 dogs that's treating the bear anyways, to be honest with you, if the bear's got a tendency to treat. Now, for a person like myself, a person that's into this, when you release those dogs, that's when we hear that barking, which might sound like noise to some of you in this room, to us it's music. and it evokes a visceral reaction, a feeling to me that suddenly you're in the moment. To me, it takes me back to, as Andy pointed out, to hound hunters from the past, and we're sort of part of something bigger when this all happens, when we're listening to these hounds. And you're in the moment. But it's also a feeling of, it's both a feeling of exhilaration and also some trepidation. Because every time you unleash those dogs, every time you clip those leashes, you never know quite what might happen. Each hunt is unique, each hunt is challenging, and each hunt can be rewarding. But we love our dogs so much that every time you let them go, you're very concerned about their safety. And so it's mixed feelings when we let them go. When we want to, the chase. This is what it's about for us. And so that leads to the fact that we do a lot of listening. And if we can't listen to the dogs, we want to get into a place where we can listen to the dogs. And that's key. So I think there's sometimes a perception out there that hound hunters, you see them, they're sitting in a truck beside the road, and you're like, oh boy, they don't ever get out of the truck. Well, they're sitting on that road to protect their dogs from getting hit on that road. That's why they're sitting there. And they're anticipating, perhaps the dogs are coming that way. So we do a lot of listening or finding places where we can listen. And that's where I want to sort of transition into a little bit of discussion about the GPS collars and about radio collars in general. So historically, when folks released the dogs, you had to say, like I said, stay within listening. And we still strive for that all the time. However, sometimes when the dogs go over a ridge or too far out, we can't hear them anymore. Maybe there's a road that gets us close to them. In the old days, we would run and listen and run and listen and run. My old mentor, Fred Albizer, said he used to run so hard that he'd see stars coming down beside his eyes. I did a lot of that too. I didn't have telemetry when I first started running hounds, which somewhat dates me, I think, unfortunately. I did a lot of running too, and trying to keep up with it. You can't keep up with a hound, but at least you can keep within hearing. So what we used to do is, last place we heard him, we'd set a compass course and just keep going in that direction. And eventually, you'd hope to hear them. So in about 1980s, when I started working in the Fish and Wildlife field, VHF telemetry was becoming online for state wildlife agencies and houndsmen. So it was, these were radio collars. It was VHF, so it wasn't GPS. And it was bulky, it wasn't particularly reliable, but it did give us some assurance. It did give us some assurance that we could find our dogs at the end of the day, because back in the old days, sometimes you'd hunt them one day and then search for them for 3. And we always had nameplates on the collars with call collect, reward, that sort of thing. And thankfully, for many, many kind landowners or citizens, we'd get our dogs back. They'd say, hey, I got a dog here with your name on it. And you'd go and retrieve the dog if you lost them, particularly on bear hunting. Not so much with smaller game, but certainly bear hunting. So it was, you can imagine the sleepless nights that we had when we lost our dogs. It really wasn't good for the dogs, it wasn't good for us. And so radio collars was a great game changer. Suddenly we had a tool to allow us to get the dogs back at the end of the day. And that was key to us. So VHF collars were the first thing. The first thing we heard back then in 1980 was, oh my God, you're going to decimate the bear population. You've got these radio collars. Oh my goodness. And we've heard the same thing with the GPS collars today. But I want to tell you what these things do. These things only tell you where the dog is. I can put this collar on me and I can't tree a bear. And I can put this collar on a dog that's not very good, and I'm just going to have a really nice collar on a really bad dog. And it's not going to tree a bear any more with this collar than not. This collar tells us where the dog is. And this collar saves dogs' lives. This is what it does. It saves dogs' lives. So it's not a cheap technology. This is over $1,000 right here. And these dogs that are used for bears or for bobcats or raccoons are also worth a lot of money. And some of these bear dogs, guys will not sell them for $10,000. Worth a lot of money. But to me, it's not the monetary thing, not at all. I want my dog back at the end of the day because I love it. And so this is our assurance. This is right. This doesn't catch bears. This doesn't catch raccoons. It tells you where the dog is. And the great thing about this, because of the training features that are on here, we can stop our dogs from getting into hazards. We can stop them before they get to a road. We can stop them before they get to thin ice, which I've done, and I've done the road thing too. We can stop them when they head up to dangerous ledges and mountains where they could be hurt. And I can call my dogs off of game at any time with these collars. It's amazing technology because of the training buttons that are as part of this system. So it's really been wonderful to have that. Because prior to that, again, and we still, you know, what I want to emphasize, we're still doing a lot of walking and a lot of listening because we want to hear our dogs. We don't want to lose track of them, and we don't want to lose hearing of them because we enjoy hearing them. We enjoy hearing that hunt, that active hunt. We want to hear that. So sometimes you get into places that aren't exactly pleasant. In fact, the definition of good bobcat habitat is a place that no human should ever go. Not very pleasant to be in. So again, a lot of walking occurs despite having these collars. You're going to walk in to retrieve your dogs. You're going to walk into the treat animal. You're going to walk looking for tracks. You're going to walk looking so that you can hear better. But you know, I walked close to 400 miles, a snowshoe close to 400 miles just this winter myself. This is the track. So what this device does is tracking the dog's real time. So we know what that dog, where it is in real time, what it's doing. It indicates if the dog is treed, if the dog is sitting, if the dog is barking. It tells us how fast they're going and how far they've gone. So it's just amazing technology. I hate technology, to be honest with you. As Diane knows, I can't deal with a computer that doesn't turn on. And I get frustrated when technology messes up. But I'll tell you, this technology is fantastic. And you know, I know a lot of folks in the room have used GPS for just general hunting anyways, but to have this on our dogs is fantastic. And of course, GPS is being used in wildlife research all the time now. They've got GPS collars that are going on woodcock, for goodness sake. So it's really come a long ways. But it just gives us that control so that if the dog is headed towards posted land, we can stop it. There's even features in these where you can set up a map of land you don't want the dog to go to. And again, the main thing for me is avoiding those hazards and getting that dog back at the end of the day. So, how does the hunt end up? Well, you know, if your dogs get tired, they quit sometimes. The goal is, of course, is to hopefully, you know, get your game in a tree if it's a bobcat or a bear or a raccoon. That is the sweetest music of all to our ears. It's a culmination for us when we have that happen. All the training, it may be years of training, years of work to develop a line of dogs that can do that. A huge investment in time and money, frankly. And by the way, you know, one nice little side note, the GPS, it does save a lot of wear and tear in vehicles and gas because you're not driving around looking for lost dogs. And so, you know, we either tree you know, with bears and raccoons and bobcats, they're either going to be treed or they're going to bay up. They might take refuge under a blowdown or in a hole, and then they might go on a hole. And that's the end of the hunt. We go retrieve the dogs, and those are all successful hunts for us. You know, it's not about killing game for me. It's just not. You know, if I've heard my dogs have done a good job, and I can retrieve them, and we all go home at the end of the day. That's a successful hunt. So. You know, I've often asked myself why I do this thing, why I abuse myself each winter for days on end and get out of bed on these cold, snowy mornings and so forth. And one is, like I said earlier, I feel like I'm part of something much bigger. It's part of tradition. It's, you know, when I think about my hunting, I'm thinking that about fur-clad indigenous peoples up in the Arctic letting their sled dogs go to bay up a polar bear. I'm thinking of the fox hunters that Andy had a picture of. I'm thinking of possum hunters down south. And I'm thinking of the woodsmen in New England that, you know, snowshoe through the snowy woods and on the spoor of a bobcat. And so that's all part of that tradition that we feel part of being a houndsperson. And, but really, the most driving force for me is the dogs themselves. I absolutely love being with these dogs. I admire their perseverance, their desire, their efforts that they put in to do a good job at what they do. And they inspire me. And you know, I can't say how much I really love these animals. I mean, they really, really do. And you know, when I'm snowshoeing through the woods and I can hear their voices a mile or two away, and my 65-year-old legs are tired, those voices keep me going. And I have nothing but, you know, they've done their job, now it's time for me to do my job. And so that's what it's all about for me. It's really about the dogs. It's not about killing game. It's just being out there with these magnificent animals, seeing them do the good job that they do. And that's really what it's all about. I might have one more. And that's Tilly. That was the puppy at the beginning of she's 4 years old now. So thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Rose, you're the one who requested this. I'm going to give you the opportunity first if you have any questions.
I don't have a lot of questions. I just wanted to hear back if I could. With respect to the hound permits, how many did we say we typically issue in New Hampshire?
So on the hound permits for bear, was it for bear? So on the permit to take a bear with hounds, we typically issue anywhere between 250 and 300 a year. The other permit that was mentioned was the training permit to train during the summer, and that varied by species. It was so. I don't know what they used to be, but for the more popular species, which would include bear, snowshoe hare, and raccoon, that averaged around 200 a year, 200 permits, or 200 individuals sought permission to train on those species. And for the less popular species, fox, coyote, fisher, and squirrel, it was 50 to 80 a year.
Okay, just as a follow-up, if I could, Andy, for the training portion,
Yeah.
If there's a closed season, you need a permit.
Yes.
If there's not a closed season, you don't need a permit?
That's correct. So coyote is referenced on some of these training permits. Technically, by law, it would not need to be because coyote has no closed season. There is training would be allowed. You know, there's no specific training season for coyote because it's allowed because there's no closed season. But these other species require the permit because they have a training season which allows that activity during a non-take portion.
Can I follow up with one more?
So one more.
Okay. With respect to that, about how many, and perhaps you don't have the data, but how many sports people do we have that like to run coyotes with hounds?
So we don't have good data on that. You know, if we if we use the data that we have as a subset, we can say that that it seems to be stable, but because it's not required, we know that the data I presented there for coyote would be a minimum, because some people aren't getting the permit because it's not required. So, we simply don't have the data on that. What we know about, what we can speculate based on what we know about, say, bear hunting versus coyote hunting and who owns dogs, it seems to be considerably lower compared to bear hunting. But we don't have any hard data on that.
So it's kind of safe to assume that if we had a season on coyotes, you would anticipate about the same number of sportsmen that would look for getting a permit.
I think that would be reasonable, and
We don't know that, but.
You're right. Now, if you establish a season on coyotes and establish a closed portion, then they would fall under this requirement to need to obtain a training.
Commissioner Stoll?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Stats worked up in the Great North Woods for many years as a deer biologist. And if you listen real close about how many miles he walks a day, he doesn't walk like this. He walks like a damn deer. I mean, he is going so fast. And it's kind of strange because the color of his hair never used to be that color or that long. It's the air over in that damn state of Vermont that must have done.
Are you like getting ready, isn't
He was a wonderful deer biologist. I can't believe an old game wasn't saying something good about a biologist, but I had second doubts about it because he's chasing those damn dogs all through the woods. I mean, he is in excellent shape. You can look at him. Even his age now, he's still in good shape. And he was an asset to the Fish and Game Department when he was working. And now he's retired and doing that damn dog thing now. It wasn't a question. I just had to make a statement.
This is my winter hair, Eric. This is my winter hair. It's coming off.
I think I recall an old game warden that used to take trout, put it on his back and carry it up into the back country
I was
pond.
nowhere near the condition he was.
And your hair color changed too. Commissioner Zarosa.
Andy, great presentation. I did want to make one comment about the use of dogs to hunt animals in this part of the country. My ancestors, the Mi'kmaq and Penobscot, as well as some of the Abenaki, used dogs to hunt here for as long as we know the domestication of dogs. They would run down bears, wolves, all sorts of animals. We often look at it from this European perspective that it's purely because unfortunately those breeds didn't survive to today because of colonization. But it's an important part of this landscape and ecosystems that existed for upwards of 20,000 years. So I think that's an important lens when some people want to call into this question, which I understand, I'm empathetical to that. And also there's a modern directive in First Nations called the Honorable Harvest, which addresses the idea of technology. And what it says is that technology makes things safer, we should embrace it. In this case, I have no doubt that my ancestors would have put GPS collars on their dogs because it's safer for both the animal they're trying to harvest as well as the animals they're using. And I also think that we need to remember that we can't call into practice an entire thing based on the ethics of one person. I know some people have had negative experiences around some people that they saw as not being a responsible use of something. But the ethics of a single person can't be used to judge an entire population in the state. And I just think that's a very important lens that we look at when we discuss this topic. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other commissioners got any questions?
I have one, Chairman. It was for Andy. It was involved the small game survey. So that, just clarifying, that's just the numbers based upon the people who fill out the survey and send it in.
Yeah.
That's not the numbers statewide. That's just.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the hours of hunter effort reported by the people who responded to the survey. I don't know off the top of my head know the response rate, but the general response rate on a wildlife survey when we send it out is usually in the 10 to 12% range. My guess is the small game survey has a similar response rate. So, that's a subset sampling of all small game.
Well, you did get mine this year because my bird dog puppy ate mine.
Not excuse.
Thank you. Commissioner Hodgson, do you have anything to say?
Good, thank
Get
you.
up.
Saving it for the next group.
Thank you. I'm going to ask if the public has anything they want to ask. This is not a biannual hearing. This isn't taking comments on rulemaking. I'd like it to keep it to on the hound hunting if they have anything to ask. If you could show of hands of anybody that would have a question. I see 1, 2, 3. I'm going to allow you 3 people to ask a question. Again, this isn't about rulemaking. Excuse me? And I'm going to limit it you to time. I just haven't decided how long yet. Would you like to go first? Yes, sir.
My
Your
name is-
name and where you're from.
My name is Tom Cross. I'm from Washington, New Hampshire, and I'm a novice. So, but I like your, you run like a deer, a gazelle. I'm here because of the coyote. And I know we didn't really get reported on the coyote. You did the best you could. But when the raccoon is treed, or the bear is treed, in my situation, at least what I know, is that the coyote can't be treated. So what happens when the dog catches up with the coyote, or dogs?
Do we have anybody here that actually coyote hunts with a dog?
Well, I'm asking you because you seem...
I've never hunted coyotes with dogs, but I can tell you from what little I know, coyote hunter that I talked to who's no longer in it, but his experience was it was like a giant fox hunt, and they'd shoot the coyotes ahead of the dogs. In fact, some of the slow dogs that they used, they liked because they barked, they could hear them coming from a long ways away. A coyote would be out ahead, trotting along, made an easier shot. And so that was the experience that they had. I can't tell you about today's experience because I don't hunt coyotes with dogs. I know you can find all kinds of awful things on social media. I know there's these kinds of horrible pictures and stuff. I don't know, but that's as much as I can say from what I'm talking to a coyote hunter that I have dealt with in the past, but I've never hunted coyotes.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
All right, thank you, sir. Ma'am, up in the back, you want to go next?
Well, I appreciate your love of how you express your
Okay,
love
get your
of
name
dogs.
and where you're from.
Peggy Longley from Sandwich, New Hampshire. That was really wonderful to hear how important they are to you, and that's why you do what you do. Also, I appreciate how smart they are, and I'm very interested when you say they're collared and you have some options of how to talk to them. What things do you communicate?
Yeah. So there are essentially three buttons on the GPS collar, and one is what's called the tone. And I start with puppies at a really early age, and so it emits a beep. And for whatever reason, Peggy, my dogs really respond to that, to come, or to come to me when I push that. The second button is a vibrate, so you could either use the beep or the vibrate to get the dog's attention, to condition the dog to come into you. The third button is the one we don't like to use. It emits an electrical stimulus, and it has various degrees of strength. I rarely ever use it, but I would use it, and I have used it to save their lives. So yes, we've all heard the word shock collar, but it's an electrical stimulus, and you can set it very low, which is what we like to do. And so that's the last, I don't know about the last resort, but that's the other button that you've got on there. So if that dog is headed towards a 3-lane highway, and your word is not going to respond to the tone, but I got to tell you, my dogs respond amazingly to the tone. But if for some reason they don't, you can hit that third button and they get a shock. which they don't like, and they're gonna turn around and come back. So, yeah, so a good question for sure. I'm not being evasive with it, it's electric stimulus that, you know, nobody would want that on their neck, but it's a lifesaver.
So that's part of the training, they're all very, very in tune to what you're trying to do.
Absolutely, yes, yeah, yeah.
All right, thank you. Chris, you have a question?
I do.
Remember question.
I'm all about questioning. So Chris Shadler, Webster, New Hampshire. Thanks, Will, for your presentation. Just a point of clarification. During a training season, when you're training young dogs or dogs on a yearly basis, are those dogs permitted to take the animal that they're being trained to hunt?
Oh, no, no.
No. Kevin?
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah, no,
And that is not allowed, of course, as I've answered many times, that's not allowed. That would be an illegal method of tape. The requirement is for a hunter to report that to us. When that happens, it very rarely happens. I think in my 32-year career, I've had 2 calls where an animal has been taken by, and I believe both were bears, small bears, and the dogs overran and took, or the chase ended up killing the animal in the training season. So that is not allowed. That would be a violation if it's not reported.
And another question, just to follow up to that. So is that written somewhere? I mean, my concern is that since there's no closed season on the coyote,
Yep.
that people don't need permits. If people don't need permits, how are they going to know what the law is? And, because I may not be allowed a follow-up question, who's enforcing? Who's out there in the woods to see what's happening out
So
there?
we're out there enforcing it, that's what we get paid to do. And the laws are inclusions or illegal methods of take, basically. So if you're not allowed to do it in New Hampshire, it's similar to the fact our laws don't restrict the use of dogs, they allow it. So if it's not forbidden, you can use a dog to do that. But it is forbidden to use a dog to commit the actual taking. The dogs are used for the chase, the pursuit, if I can explain that to you. So you're not allowed to use a dog, any kind of dog, to take an animal on its own. You can't kill the animal and bring it back to you, no matter when the season. That's not allowed. That's not allowed by law. And if it happens, and it does on occasion, when it does, we require a hunter to contact us, and then we would seize the animal. We're not allowed to keep the animal.
Okay, didn't answer my question though.
Okay.
I want to know how somebody that doesn't need a permit knows.
It isn't tied to the permit, Chris.
Or,
It isn't tied to the
so
permit.
it's up to the hunter to know what the regulations in the
That's
state
correct.
are.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah. He's held responsible for what the regulations are. The smart thing for him to do is be aware of them. He's held to that responsibility.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
See, Chris, you're following protocol so well, I was gonna let you have another
Oh,
one.
yeah.
Do you have another question?
No,
Okay,
listen, don't, I'm fine,
thank
for
you.
the time being.
Sir,
Just wondering, is there a database?
all right, sir, I need your name and where you're
No,
from.
my name is Ken Coffin, I live in Hillsborough, New Hampshire, I'm a property owner. Is there a database that you can read your GPS to tell you that my land is posted?
No.
No, not that it's posted, but there's a database on Onyx Hunt. It's a photographic, it's an aerial photography application, I guess you'd call it, that you can download onto these GPSs. So you will have the land ownership boundaries and the owner of that land on there. So if we knew that your land was posted, we would absolutely stop the dogs from going.
Do you know the process for that?
Well, you buy Onyx through Cabela's or Garmin, and you can download it onto this GPS that I have right here. So it's an aerial photography that has all the boundaries of the different ownerships on it. So,
Okay.
yep.
Right, okay. I just want to know your dogs can't read.
That's right. Oh, absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah. No, it's a huge responsibility. Like I said, every time we unleash those dogs, the last thing we want to do is bother anybody and have the dogs get into trouble. And so it's, that responsibility is squarely on our shoulders as hound hunters, men and women that hunt hounds. Absolutely. That's occurred for as long as there's been hounds. And I tend to hunt a lot of public land. It's usually not an issue for me. I hunt really big country, big wild country. It's either large landowners, like paper companies, well, it's not paper companies anymore, TMOs and stuff. But yeah, with the more people that have moved into, whether it's Vermont or New Hampshire, and the more partitioning we've had of those properties, there's more issues with that, for sure. And you know, I own property in 2 towns, and it's not posted at all, but I'm very respectful that somebody that does have, they've got the reasons. Yeah.
Well, just a comment, from personal experience, I've had a bear tree on my property.
Okay, sir, I was keeping this to a question. Okay? I told you I wanted to keep this to questions. I still have a meeting continue. I don't want to get into your personal experience.
All right,
Thank you.
Thank you.
I see 3 hands go up, and now I'm up to what, 5? One more. Go ahead.
Joan O'Brien from Amherst, New Hampshire. And my question is, what harm would it do to the hunting community if we had a law that disallowed using dogs to hunt coyotes?
Thank you. Okay, next item. Diane, you want to get up and try and have some ice?
This was rhetorical.
I don't know who your question was at, Joan. That'd be a rulemaking, which I've got it here written down.
Well, then it's a point.
Okay.
Diane, you?
Yeah. Are you killing it, or are you?
Sure.
Okay, hi everybody, thank you. My name is Diane Dimmons. I'm the Inland Fisheries Division Chief. And just a quick annual information item. This is for our 2023 seasonal fish habitat needs. So just to give a quick information blip, we did finish the Saco River watershed last year. So very exciting. We weren't sure if we were going to be able to finish it, but with collaborations with various entities over in that whole area, north to south, we were able to get everything completed and are now working on our public outreach and collaborations to further the restoration efforts in that regime. So we still have some data. These are actually some images from last year, so that's a really nice wild brook trout. A lot of the areas that we're surveying are small streams, not necessarily areas that we stock. So we're hiking into the backcountry, trying to hit midpoints of areas where we don't have fish data and collecting information on different fish species, habitat, as well as looking at stream crossings. So we still have some big data gaps, which brings me to today's presentation. Right here in Grafton County, as well as in the Upper Connecticut. Today we'll talk mostly Grafton County. We have 556, done that anymore. 506 is plenty. This is a multi-year effort. There's no way in Hades that we're going to do 506 sites in one summer. It's nearly impossible.
Our seasonals work 28 hours a week due to the various insurance reasons, and so unfortunately that limited timeline definitely prevents us from getting 506 items done in one summer. That would be awesome, probably unrealistic. So, and as most of you know, Grafton County is our largest county, and so there's a very large geographic span that this county covers. So we have 506 areas that we need to electrofish, and then we also have just a little under 2,200 stream crossings that we survey. That's bridges, culverts, sometimes that's major roads, sometimes that's smaller roads, sometimes that's trails. We used to just look at the major roads. We're now looking at trails. As a lot of you know, a lot of old railroads that are now abandoned have terrible stream crossings in them. So some of them have collapsed, some of them are just completely undersized, some of them are old stone arches, which is actually pretty neat, but unfortunately really narrow because of course a big span costs a lot of money, and in the olden days it wasn't necessarily something they had. So the stream crossings are covering a wide variety of areas, and all of this information is guiding us to help restore our watersheds to areas or in areas where we can, foster wild brook trout populations, as well as other fish species, as well as other aquatic organisms. So pretty much brook trout are our poster child. If it's good for them, it's good for a ton of other species of importance. So. And the financial piece, which is always the most important, currently in the fish habitat account, we have $956,000. This request today for $31,000 is about 3.3% of that. So just a small blip to be able to collect this information that's so important, that helps us promote the cold water fisheries program for New Hampshire Fish and Game, as well as provide opportunity for various communities, as well as our angler communities as well. And with that, this is an example of electrofishing. So anybody that doesn't know, it is exactly what it says. It's putting electricity into the water. A little bit different than the shock collars. I can't put collars on fish. So I have to zap the entire water. It does temporarily stun them. It does not hurt them, and we can collect the fish, take their lengths and weights, and then they put them back in the water and they swim away and everything's hunky-dory. It's a non-lethal method, and it's one of the methods for fish assessment across the world, not just New Hampshire or the United States. So with that, I'll take any questions. I know it's kind of a quick blip. It's our annual request. So.
Yes. I have some questions.
Sure.
Well, agree.
I have executive powers. Diane, I've been on the commission 4 years now.
Yep.
And every 4 years you've come before this commission asking for this money for some help.
Yep.
And for 4 years in a row, I've turned around and said, hey, let's make this an action item. Let's give Diane some money. Last year don't smile yet. Last year, I asked for, what is all this data been producing? Where has our money been going? And I was under the understanding we were going to get a report on that. What is all this that we're doing? What is the outcome? When does it end? What are we trying to figure out?
So this is, so that's a hard answer in that this is the cold water program. So everything that we do, so all those little dots, and I know this color choice, now that I'm looking at it from afar, is horrible, but all of those dots on the state of New Hampshire map are brook trout surveys that we have done over the years. So basically what we're looking at now is trying to finish our data gaps and then be able to do, and simultaneously, because of course these are ongoing things as catastrophic events happen, landscape changes, you have different events that change the landscape and then changes the population within the landscape. So all of this data goes into a database that we're now looking at prioritization for restoration and grant funding. We're looking at prioritization and wild trout management efforts. And then also, everybody utilizes our data. I say everybody because the Eastern Brook Trout Joint Venture, various academia, DES uses our data. They've come up with different modeling for various permitting that occurs and looking at presence, absence of species of concern. And so it's an ongoing thing. So, but there are reports that are done of which assessments we've done across the landscape, but it's not like a, you know, we've done 56 brook trout sites this year and, you know, here's a report. I mean, it's all in a database, and at the end of the entire watershed, there's a report that's written. So right now, we're working on the Saco watershed, because that's our...
Right, but I guess my question is, when
does it end?
I think you answered one of my, what I was hinting towards is this just becoming a wild brook trout initiative?
No.
Well, when is this gonna stop?
It never stops, because the landscape is...
So we're just gonna constantly collect data?
Absolutely, we always do. So just like wildlife, just like fisheries, populations are changing as the landscape changes. So there are sites that we've been to, and there are sites that we return to because something's changed, or if different ownership, like the Dartmouth Grand is one of our long-term data sets because it's a single ownership, and we can actually look at what New Hampshire has for capacity. So, and there's big brook trout there that are utilized by a ton of our constituents. Now, that's general reg, it's not fly fishing only, it's not some targeted group. It's completely open to everyone. I mean, obviously it's private land ownership, but at the same time, there is access 100%. And that landscape, those conditions within that landscape enable a population of brook trout that we have nowhere else.
And which groups are using this data?
Oh, there's a ton of groups using our data. I mean, so you have various communities that are using the data to be able to acquire grants to fix stream crossing culverts for roads, for safety, for, you know, the list
I
goes
guess
on.
is there others that are chipping in on helping collect this data?
Oh, absolutely,
money-wise?
yes. The Saco watershed had Green Mountain Conservation, Tin Mountain Conservation, every single one of the 19 communities were part of the data collection and are now part of the prioritization and figuring out what things need to be fixed and where we should go and target grants first, and team building to be able to apply for grants, because all these restoration efforts that happen within New Hampshire, this fish habitat account pays for some, but it is peanuts compared to what happens across the landscape by various partners and communities. So it's, our portion is very small compared to what happens. Yeah. Now, see, I gave you your data. But yeah, so it's an ongoing effort, which sounds, that's why I say it's a difficult answer. It's not like, you know, you do one stream. We used to do the olden days, we did habitat surveys on one river. So like you took the Ashwellet River, you know, back in the day, in 1996, you know, we collected data and we wrote a report on the Ashwellet River. We have morphed from that because the reality is that's one summer. Those are one summer of conditions. Next summer, the data is totally different.
Okay.
And so it's an ongoing process. These two parameters allow us to do all sorts of things and garner funding for various aspects. I mean, some of it's land conservation, so WMAs and figuring out which areas we want to protect, work with land conservation groups. Ammonoosuc Conservation Trust used our data to help purchase land for a conservation easement. So it's a variety of different entities that happen, and that's why I say fish species, not just brook trout. The money's in brook trout, I'm not gonna lie to you, the money is absolutely hands down. Brook trout and T&E species, that's where you get your big bang for your buck. So, and like I said, brook trout are a poster child, so if we get data on brook trout, the habitat's good for them, then it's gonna be beneficial to everybody else.
Thank you, Dan. Any other commissioners? Oh, here we go.
John had his hand up 20 minutes.
Oh, and wait, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, I apologize. I just want to make sure it's clear that the rationale and the justification for being higher than last year, there's a 10% raise floating out there, there's a labor grade reclassification floating out there, and I just want to be able to ask once, not have to come back come July 1 if changes go into play. So that's the rationale for being higher than the year past.
Commissioner Caven.
Couple of questions, if I may. Correct me, Diane, but this focus is generally now, as opposed to just being on the Ashwheeler or a river, you're looking at watersheds, correct?
Yeah.
I believe that, and I think you classified it as a watershed, the Beebe River.
Yeah.
That's a little bit of an older study.
Yep.
Could you give an example of what might have changed in your management policies for that watershed based on that study that was done, when was it, 8 or 10 years ago, the Beebe River?
Yeah.
So I guess what I'm asking, and it may be helpful to someone else, I hope, is this work is done, it's going to be ongoing, okay, but based on a previous study in another watershed, this is what we extracted from the data gathered, and this is how we've changed a little bit of our management focus. Is that a fair question?
Yeah, absolutely. So a little bit of an answer with a timeline, I'll put it that way. So in the past, we just did the river, and you reported on the river. Now we're looking at the watershed approach because the landscape surrounding said river has a lot of entities that potentially shift your direction. And so the Beebe is a perfect example because we did the entire Beebe watershed, and from that we had multiple culvert replacements, we had land protection that was occurred, and we have a ton of users that utilize that water body for angling. And so all of the message got out. It was a ton of partners that worked together for that project. It was a small amount on our end, and ended up with a big bang for our buck as far as restoration and an angling opportunity in perpetuity.
One more question, if I may, Chairman?
Sure.
So in terms of what may occur as a result of data gathered, interpretation, discussion, it may not be just what you might do in terms of managing the fish population.
Correct.
It may have to do with infrastructure in the watershed and improvement of that.
Absolutely. So in an effort, so I kept this a little bit short, but we can absolutely expand into this data is driving our stocking. So we have made changes in stocking across the landscape because of the habitat data that we've identified where brook trout can survive on their own. And so management-wise, we've changed from, stocking on top of wild fish, so to speak. And then also areas where we know the habitat gets warm, then, if it is a stocked area, then putting those stocked fish in earlier when things are colder to provide the opportunity and not stocking them into, June, July when the water gets hot. And so your angling opportunities, your management within that regime have totally shifted because of the capacity to look at that. And in the future, the other aspect is stream temperature. Things are getting warmer. We have much more mild winters. We have a much more common event to have a drought. And so as these changes are happening on the landscape, it's my job to make sure that I'm still providing for the angling public. And so being able to have this information in a real-time way, which is the other part of hiring, seasonals in multiple pods so that we can get as much data as we can throughout the summer. So we have a timeline that actually makes sense instead of, 10 years ago we did the beginning of the river and now 10 years later we're doing the end, and the beginning has totally changed because Irene came through, which totally happened actually. So, so now we're trying to get that timeline to match so that when we're looking at the effects of changes in the habitat across the landscape over time, we can actually make much better management decisions.
Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Temple.
Thank you. I have one comment. I know there's a big blank space there in Sullivan County,
Yeah,
my county.
Yeah.
The rest of the state's got a lot of docks and pretty heavily covered, especially to my left and right, the Cheshire, the Grafton, and even up in Carlos County. My question is this, can you educate not only ourselves or remind the commission, but the people in the public, the money, where does the money come from that goes into that habitat fund?
so there's every license that gets purchased for angling, every fishing license, there is a habitat fee, and that money is from that.
That's what makes up that 900,000.
Correct, right, there's nothing.
It's $1 from the sale of each fishing license, so.
Okay, and that's an accumulative amount, it keeps
Correct.
building, so
Yeah.
we take from it.
Yeah.
My second question, if I could, is we're engaged with New Hampshire DES with respect to the culvert bridge replacement. I mean, we have a seat at that table.
New Hampshire Geological Survey, correct. The stream crossing team, which is new relatively speaking within the past 5 years, I want to say, never used to exist. We kind of did our thing, DES did their thing, DOT did their thing, and now the stream crossing team was developed, and there are multiple people at the table. Department of Transportation, Emergency Services, Department of Environmental Services, us at Fish and Game. You have various entities depending on the community that are working with New Hampshire Geological Survey and DES, and then there is the Fish and Wildlife Service and there's an EPA. So there's multiple folks at the table that are working on that stream crossing and habitat survey realm to be able to collect important data for a variety of reasons. And also as a result of that, with the SACO, we actually just applied for a FEMA grant as well, the SACO project team, to be able to do a bunch of crossings in one quick time span, which has never been done before. And so we'll find out if we actually got the grant or not, but this data gives us that opportunity as well.
So Diane, my last question, if you permit me to speak. Usually it's their assistant here that takes up all the time. Lastly, we authorized the purchase of some electro. Are those now in place?
Yes, we got them and they've all been, actually there's one still upstairs that goes down to Keene. So if anybody wanted to take a peek at it, you could. But yeah, see, I'm thinking of you guys. But yes, we did.
In Cheshire County.
Well, Keene is our regional office, so it's not full work.
Anybody on this side of the table got any questions? None? None?
Coming back around?
None? No, I'm not coming back around. Any more questions regarding this subject?
I got a quick question. I know it says it's only an information item. Can we move it to be an action item and vote?
You can make that motion.
I will make a motion to move this from an information item to an action item to vote to approve.
I'll second.
I won't amend the motion. I'm going to.
Grafton County can't second that?
I withdraw my second.
All right, a motion has been made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, those in favor to move it to an action item, say what?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, now it's an action
I'll make a
item.
motion that we approve this expenditure.
I'll second it.
Whoa, for what amount?
The amount requested. 31,300,
31,300?
please. Yes.
Okay, is there a second to it?
I'll second it.
Any discussion on the amount? Hearing none. I'll call for those in favor.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
See,
Now think of this, I will let my seasonal pool know, thank you very much for moving this ahead, because that enables us to actually proceed with interviews and be able to let our academic students know that they have a job this summer, so thank you very much.
Legislative Committee report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We met this morning with the quorum, and I am going to, my first item is to make a motion for the full commission to vote on, to accept the legislative committee's recommendation to return to only voting opposed or support and not take a vote of no position on bills monitored by staff. And I would like to speak to my motion.
Explain what the vote is again.
I'm making a motion to accept the legislative committee's vote 4-0 to return to voting only opposed or support and not to take a vote of no position on bills monitored by staff.
I'll second for discussion.
Yeah. We're already on.
So if I may.
Did
you second?
I second.
Thank you. Yeah, we spoke about how we had voted last year to start taking strictly oppose or support for a vote. We didn't clarify addressing legislation that may be of concern that we don't vote on. We did away with as written, opposed to as written. We did away with that. But the department wants us to look at some of the legislation that we should be aware of, but we don't need to vote on. We don't need to vote on. So we got kind of slipped into voting on taking no position, but really we don't need to vote. We just want to know that that legislation is out there, and the department personnel may be following it.
All right, the motion's been made, it's been seconded, we're into the discussion. Right now, the way it stands on the commission was we either vote in favor or against. I want to make sure we're clear on this, because we've already voted to say in favor and against. For some reason, I'm not thinking the same as what was in the committee, and that's why I'm getting lost a bit, I think, here.
Yeah, essentially from last month, when we went through the
But
list, and I
get
called
it.
for those no positions, and this created a lot of confusion, as you and I discussed, and so this is just going on the record that we're not going to do that anymore because it created too much confusion.
Right.
And it was also counter to our original vote in April 2022, that we just say support or oppose.
So I don't think we need, if I may, sorry, a motion and another vote. We just need to realign, say, reminder everybody, if you recall, April 2022, this is the positions we're going to take. And we're not going to do anything above and beyond that. So it's more just a reminder, and I would not recommend we do another vote because it's already a vote and a position recorded in the notes.
I can withdraw my motion, and I will go on the record that the Rockingham commissioner did not want our committee to go that way last year, and she was vindicated because it did create some problems.
Say that again?
It's okay.
Never mind.
Thank you.
We wanted to take an opportunity to explain that we will be monitoring bills that we're not going to vote on.
We're not going to do
Thank
no
you.
position anymore.
Okay, I got it, thank you.
All right, so
All right,
that,
because I wanted to avoid that whole no position taken vote.
right,
So we solved that.
we did.
Okay, so we don't need a vote.
That's right. Okay,
Thank
I
you.
withdrew my,
What?
I withdrew my motion.
Right. So right now, there's no motion, other than he's got to withdraw.
I'll
it.
withdraw the second.
Thank you. Item number 2 is that staff has no hearings to attend in the foreseeable future. And item number 3 is under miscellaneous in our meeting. We had Commissioner Stoll bring up his research on rulemaking, and with the chair's permission, I will yield the floor to Commissioner Stoll to discuss his
Yes.
handout.
You want to discuss it now?
I guess so, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll get my face like that. This might be boring to the people in the audience, but anyway, this has to do with rulemaking. Right now, it's being interpreted within the department that rulemaking may or may not involve a commission. And I maintain that the authority to make a rule which have the full effect of law, rests with the commission. So if the ability to make a rule starts with legislative authority, no agency, no department can try and make a rule without a law giving that agency the ability to do that. They call it statutory authority. And without an RSA giving the agency the ability to make a rule, the rule is invalid. So the law that pertains to rules is 541A. And rules shall be valid and binding on persons they affect and shall have the force of law unless amended or revised or unless a court of competent jurisdiction determines otherwise. How does a bill become a law over at the Gold Dome? Legislative approval. The House and the Senate have to approve a bill that goes in. I want to make cats the animal of the official animal of New Hampshire. That would go in front of the House, go in front of the Senate, and if both passes, goes in front of the governor. If he likes it, it becomes a law. How does a thought become a rule? Legislative approval, same as a law, same as a bill. It's through JLCAR. JLCAR the abbreviation stands for Joint Legislative Committee on Administrative Rules. Who is JLCAR? Senators and state reps make up JLCAR. When an agency has an idea, they want to have a rule because the legislature has already given them the authority to do that. It goes over there in front of the reps and the senators. They hack it around this. Let's say we want to have a rule here. We have to have a hearing. The public comes in, listens to what the rule wants to do. Goes over to JLCAR, there's an initial proposal, and then there's a few steps in between, and finally ends up at a final proposal. And if they say it's okay, then they give the blessing, and they also have another hearing there. 2 or 3 hearings that the public has a chance to weigh in on. In the commission handbook, some attorney, a previous attorney, and I think it was Paul Sanderson, made the comment, rulemaking is lawmaking. And he goes on to say, in areas which the legislature has decided are too specific or too detailed to be handled by legislation. The legislature therefore delegates the lawmaking power to an agency by passing a law granting rulemaking authority to the agency to adopt rules pursuant to 541A. Back in the early 80s, they tried to hone in all the executive branches of New Hampshire state government. Tried to get a handle on it. They were growing like leaps and bounds. In 1980s, they came out with a rough template of how they were going to handle and rank these agencies. In 1994 was a big year of streamlining. Within the executive branch, there are 3 different types of agencies, as defined in RSA 21G5. Now, the lower the number of an RSA means it's getting into the core of state government. The first agency is an executive agency, means an administrative unit within the executive branch of government, which is concerned with a specific objective or administrative function. The next one is where this commission sits, which is an executive commission, means an administrative rule unit within the executive branch of state government established to provide, now this is quote unquote, a specific enterprise or regulatory function. And then there's number 11, which is an executive department, means the principal administrative unit within the executive branch of state government, which is concerned with broad responsibility. You go on to RSA 21G6, that lists the constitutional agencies, such as the Office of the Governor, the Secretary of State, on and on. The Fish and Game Department is not listed under any of these agencies. This was adopted in 2019 within the state budget is how they got this done. And it was House Bill 2, which is called the trailer bill. And the trailer bill usually provides the revenue for House Bill 1, which is the expenses. So, okay, per RSA 21G6, there are only 4 of those executive commissions that I told you have a specific enterprise and a regulatory function. Those are the State Lottery, the State Liquor Commission, the State Public Utilities Commission, and the Fish and Game Commission. This being said, the Fish and Game Department appears to be under the governance of the Fish and Game Commission. This being stipulated in RSA 206(1), which means the title of that is Commission Created, name of the department. It goes on to say, there shall be an agency of the state to be known hereafter as the Fish and Game Department. And then there's a key word right here. Under a commission to be known as the Fish and Game Commission. This particular law was drafted and adopted in 1935. It has been amended only once, and that's rare for a law to be only amended once. The amendment was, instead of saying there shall be a Fish and Game Department under the Fish and Game Commission, it said there is hereby created a Fish and Game Department under the Fish and Game Commission. That's the only change to that law that's 88 years old, creating this commission and the department. Pursuant to RSA 206(4)A, which are the duties of the commission, in addition to other duties provided by law, it shall be the duty of the Fish and Game Commissioners as citizen representatives to be stewards of the fish, wildlife, and marine resources of the state of New Hampshire, and to set general policy in the following areas. I'm not going to list the other 5. There are 6 now. There used to be only 5. But I'm going to highlight the establishment of positions on proposed legislation that affect fish, wildlife, and marine resources, and the overall management of the Fish and Game Department. It's our job to take and establish positions on all proposed legislation. This being said, when it comes to rules which are established through lawmaking, just as a bill is established through lawmaking, the Commission has its regulatory authority and shall establish positions on all rules. And then it goes on, and I provided you with copies of the different RSAs and I've got copies here of the 1988 or 83 legislation that tried to corral everything. Over at the State Library is a wealth of information over there. And you can't go online and get anything back in 1988 or 83. You have to go over there. I found that out the hard way. But, Mr. Chairman, this is what I found out about rulemaking since I have been a commissioner here for 5 or 6 years. It seems like it's very, if you ever looked in the Fish and Game laws, it's a mess out there. There are some laws that say give the director only permission to establish rules. And there's not, I don't have a problem with that, with what I found out. The director can establish rules. We don't need to, you don't need to have verbiage in there saying with the consent of the commission, because I say we already have to, do that. It's just, then there's other laws that say the executive director can do this under the supervision of the commission. What's that tell you? I mean, the department can go do what we want them to do, and they do it very well. We set general policy in these directions, and if they're allowed to go and make rules which have the full effect of law, we should know about it, and we should say, yeah, that's a good idea, but you really think, talk to us about why, because it's our job, in law, that it's our responsibility to do this. And in 1994, when they created these 4 commissions, and if anybody's been watching the marijuana debate, whether you're going to tax marijuana It's been in the news the last 2 or 3 days in New Hampshire. Guess which commission they were gonna send that to regulate?
That wasn't us.
It was the Liquor Commission, one of the 4 commissions at the end, which fishing game is one. They have regulatory authority, and they're looking at having this marijuana tax or whatever the heck they're gonna do that in one of those executive commissions, just what this commission right here. So I'm gonna stop now, because I can talk forever on this issue. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Okay, could you continue with your, any other reports?
Well, I think that's it.
Okay,
And I would like to thank Commissioner Stoll. This took
that took a tremendous amount of work.
hours, days of hours for him to travel from Coos County down to the state library. I would hazard a guess how long it took you, but I don't think enough members of the public understand it. Maybe you don't know, we don't get paid. This is something we do because we love fishing game. So thank you very much, Commissioner Stoll, and I anticipate further action on this.
I'm pretty sure the Commissioner Temple doesn't have as many dots there because his county might be a biological desert.
I don't know, I think Commissioner Temple's gonna jump up and start asking.
He's gonna come back with something later.
Okay. Where was I? Committee. Governance Committee.
The Governance Committee did meet, and we continue to basically sit through the handbook. I think we've zeroed in on some discussion that I'm not prepared to share or ask for any comments on today, but we will be meeting again in advance of the April meeting, and hopefully can bring a couple of things forward at that time. So,
Okay, while we're on the subject of Governance Committee, and I'll apologize right up front, John, due to a lot of the legislative things that have gone around in some gray areas, I am going to be making a motion to amend the handbook under the chairman's, the duties of the chair. I'm going to back up a little bit on one of the things that I got hit with on a question was, and this isn't part of any voting, a couple of commissioners were having their expenses not paid because of going to legislative hearings. Short version is, I talked with the director, talked to the AG's office. I formed a 3-commission member committee this morning. That 3-committee member went over it, looked at the regulations on it and everything. One of the regulations under what they decided was that whatever that committee decided would be a final answer. The committee decided that commissioners would be paid for going over to legislative hearings. That is a final answer. I wish the director was here, because one of the things now is I want those commissioners' sheets expedited. Thank you. So, to help clear up some of the gray areas that came up through that with my conversation with them, I am making a motion to amend in the handbook on page 12 under duties of the chair. And if you turn to page, next page is page 13, on section F, in the handbook it states, appoint commissioners to represent the commission at specific events or assignments that require commission involvement, period. That's what's in your current handbook. I want to amend that handbook to remove the period, put in a comma, and place in including testifying at legislative hearings. I'm not putting it in there to say any commissioner going over for hearing, only on testifying that you go through the chair of the commission.
A second.
I have a second by Commissioner Stoll. Discussion. Not
Excuse me,
hearing
I
any.
actually do, because I voted. So testifying, this is practically speaking, I attend the hearings, but I don't always testify because I don't get up and repeat what staff has already said. If staff has made a presentation and I don't get up and testify again.
When you say testify again,
Well, I don't testify on top of what they've already said, but if I have something to add that's more relative to the commission's position, you know, adding something to the staff to shore up the position
I
of
want
the
to
staff.
put in the book that if a commissioner is going to go over to testify, the key word testify, you want to go over to a hearing and listen to the hearing, because that's actually part of your job.
Yeah.
Is that you are staying updated on legislation.
Yeah.
Okay? The reason this came about is because some commissioners have been asked to go over and testify at a hearing. The chairman isn't even aware that it's going on. It's being asked by somebody else who does not have the authority to do that. So I want to clear up the gray area. If a commissioner is going to go to testify, that's the key word, testify, at a hearing, that'll be cleared through the chairman. Because the chairman will decide whether or not it's a bill that needs a commissioner there to testify.
Okay, so, but I may be testifying, it just is not practical. It's not practical the way the hearings are run. It's not a practical thing for me or any other commissioner who attends. Sometimes you're called from the audience, you know, from the, you're in the audience.
Yep, and we have a thing in place for that. If a fishing game does get called, we've had designated people that would make a decision on the fly.
No, that's not what I'm saying. You get called by the senator or the House rep because you're present. Even if you didn't plan to testify, you get called. So are you supposed to?
Very rarely have I seen a commissioner asked to get up and answer a question. Very rarely. Over at a hearing. I'm trying to clear a gray area that's coming down through with the director.
Mr. Chairman, if I may. So you call me and say, this is commission material, I'd like you to go and sign in and speak. So I'm cleared to take mileage and get accounted for that. It's something of great concern for the commission, but I don't need to testify. The kernel's going down or whatever.
Right.
So if I choose to go, I'm gonna go without my commission shirt and sit in the back, so I don't get called on. Because that's what happened to me this year.
And that's a very smart move.
I had this shirt on and I got called on.
That's a very smart move. If you want to avoid.
Not that I wanted to avoid it. It's just
No,
that I
I'm
didn't get
saying
clearance.
if you, I call it avoid, if you want to try to avoid getting put on a spot from at a hearing, you don't read a commissioner's bill.
Or you just don't put in for the mileage.
What I'm talking about here is testifying, not hearing. The last thing I would want to do is hamper a commissioner going to a hearing. Okay? This is, and this is why I'm emphasizing testifying. If you're going to go over and testify on a bill, it should be in here that the chairman approves that. In other words, you can't have, for an example, you're chairwoman of the legislative committee, I can't have you telling Bruce Temple, go over to here, or AJ to go over here, and to testify. Come through the chairman. And I'm not doing this just for me, I'm trying to clean up an act for down the road too. This will be for any chairman coming down the road. Now it's clarified that a chairman will authorize on testimony. I don't know how clear it could be then, saying including testimony at legislative hearings. Any further discussion? Commissioner Stoll.
Mr. Chairman, you know that you and I disagree on this issue. And back when I was chair, I made a statement and I got my butt handed to me, that I didn't think any commissioner should be over at legislative hearings. Particularly wearing stuff like this. If you're sitting there, I sat there as a state rep for 10 years. I know when people are there, they got a badge or they got the uniform on, that if I have a question as a legislator, I'm going to point to that person, whether he's there to testify or not. And that person, like Commissioner Price stated, that she may go over there to listen, but after a while, they know who we are. They know she's the chair of the legislative committee. If there's something there and a legislator on that committee has a question, they're going to ask her. She may or may not know the answer. Hopefully, if she doesn't know the answer, she's going to say, I'm sorry, I don't know the answer, but I'll try to get the answer for you. I've known commissioners that go over there and they haven't got a clue what the answer is, but they wing it. And that does not make this commission or the agency look well. I've always been opposed to commissioners going over there because after a while, they're going to know every one of us. And if we're sitting in the audience with a three-piece tuxedo on, they're going to still know that we're a commissioner and they may ask that question. And I just never wanted to have any confusion for an answer because I feel the staff can answer those questions a whole lot better than I can. And I know we disagree on it, so but I do support your amendment here because I think the chairman should know that. It's just common courtesy to the chairman to do that. Thank you.
And I will be the first to admit that Commissioner Stoll and I, if you had a spectrum from here to here, he's here, I'm here. Okay? I have come this way because of some issues that have taken place in the last 3 to 4 weeks. You know, behind the scenes issues that I'm being hit with as a chairman. As you notice, I have not been over to a single legislative hearing this year. And that's due to what Commissioner Stoll says. I walk in there, they've known me for 4 years of going over there as the chairman of the legislative committee. I go walking over there right now as chairman of this commission. I couldn't get down the hallway, so I have avoided it. For the exact reason that Chairman Stoll has said. But I'm having some issues that I'm getting feedback on. I'm trying to get a grip on it. This is just for testifying, not going for a hearing. If it's a bill that I think is really something that you say you want to go over there, but it's got to do with marine fisheries, I may decide, yeah, maybe a commissioner should testify on this, but that's not your background. I may want to send coastal commissioner. But if I have something that's going in there on land for timber, I don't want to send the coastal commissioner. I may ask Caveney to go. Or Commissioner Caveney may say, hey, I'd like to go in and testify on this bill, and I may say, you know what, stay away from it. But I need to know what's going on. And not just me personally, any chairman coming down the road needs to know what's going on with this commission. To stop, you know, anything. So If there's any more discussion, I'm open to it. If not, there's a vote on the table.
I guess I'm just confused about one part. Say I show up there wearing a mustache and glasses. And I do get called on.
Hey, Jay, don't do this to me.
Shouldn't we be creating some kind of guidelines for commissioners further than this to say that if you do show up to a hearing and you are called and you weren't scheduled by the chair, that you have some kind of action that's taken?
You have the action of knowing this is where the commission stood. So when we're doing a bill, again, where I said, you know, we say we're in favor or against, you have the explanation. So you would know where the commission stands. It's no different than, who can I pick on? Kevin. Kevin goes over there all the time. And you'll hear him say, this is what the commission has voted on. He understands what the intent of was the commission. And you have to know what the intent of that commission was too. You know what I mean?
No, I don't. I'm just saying, like, shouldn't there just be a clarification that if
I don't
someone
want to say
finds
if you can
themselves in
wear
a
a beard or a
situation.
ponytail, I'm not getting into that.
I'm just saying, what should there be, if, you know, should we have in writing in our commissioner's handbook that says, if you do not know the answer, you are required to defer and say, I'm sorry, I do not know the answer. And that's a level of accountability to your board.
To me, that's common sense. I don't know if I really know.
All right.
We're getting off track. To me, that would be common sense. I don't know if I want to have to put it in writing saying.
I think it was just a little bit of a confusion. I think some people were saying that you couldn't find yourself there, period, is I think how some of us were taking that.
No, I want to be perfectly clear. Any commissioner can go over to a hearing. The chairman.
That's confusing, but, so say someone does go over as a commissioner because they're interested in the hearing, and now they get called on and asked a question, now they have to answer it. That's not the same as going over there with the intention of testifying.
And as the Chairman Stoll says, if you don't know that answer, the way to handle it is to say, I do not know that answer. However, I'll get that answer for you.
Yes.
But anything that you're over there on a hearing for, I would presume you're there, and the commission has taken a stance on the item, and you pretty much know what the commission wants. They don't want to make this too complicated, but loud and no more comments? Okay. Motion is to amend the handbook to say, including testifying at legislative hearing. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? Okay. That change has been made. Sorry to jump on your committee, John. The what? All right, do you have the wording?
Yep.
I'm gonna let you make the motion.
Yep. So as a result of that three-person committee we put together to review the commissioner expenses, I would like to make a motion to amend CG5 on page 25, where it says reasonable and necessary expenses shall include all expenses, mileage, meals, lodging, necessitated and incurred as a result of attendance at all regular monthly commission meetings, public hearings, motions to add a comma, legislative hearings, and assigned committee meetings. So to clarify, the motion is to add comma, legislative hearings, and that's it.
I'll second your motion. Thank you.
Okay, discussion. Not seeing any, those in favor to modify CG5? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Sustainability and strategic planning.
Chris Hodgins.
Chris Hodgins not here. Resource and Infrastructure Committee.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. We met this morning at 11:30. three of us present, and Commissioner Cavanian came in a little late after this legislative committee meeting. We had some general discussion, particularly concerning the fish hatchery, or fish hatcheries, I should say, and basically where we stood on work through pilot programs with our consultant HDR. We've asked, and I hope that you can get onto the agenda sometime in April and or May, that we get a executive summary type report from the executive director's office. Our staff person, Diane Timmons, has indicated she'll do her best to share with us as much as she can and make available to us sometime in mid-April. And having said that, if things don't come together, hence my request to see if we can make an agenda item. We're out there for about 15 months into the bringing on of the design team, and I don't think we've heard a report yet. Maybe we did, but I might have missed that maybe. But anyway, staff person, Diane, she was very good this morning at educating us about different things with respect to when the hatchery comes offline, it goes online, or how we're going to handle a couple of hatcheries that we had trouble with, and what that means for the fish population, and the pounds of fish that we're going to be either delaying, or how to work around continuing to serve the sports people in New Hampshire with respect to the proper stocking program and the amount of fish that we stock each year. So we'll have another meeting before, we agreed to have another meeting before the April meeting. And again, if staff can pull it together in April, we'll see something, but on your end, when you're setting agenda.
Keep in mind, April, we're dealing a lot with the agreement.
Yeah, whatever you and the executive director put together, but April or May, I'm hoping that we can bring to this commission as well as the public where and how we're going to spend this $60-odd million.
If we could shoot for May, I'm sorry, but where it's public, I think May would probably be a better time.
I could be corrected wrong, but I believe in May you're doing, not you, Cherie's doing a wind farm.
Well, I'm not asking for a total
But I will,
discussion.
yeah, I'm gonna get with the director. I've already, which, under new business, I'm gonna bringing up where we're having the next 3 commission meetings. The director's been tied up medically. I'm trying to work on what that agenda will be. But I will do.
So anything we can do, short report, I think would be appropriate.
Okay.
I mean, it's been a long time, and not only with the lawsuit, how we're doing with the pilot programs and the ramifications of what it might mean going forward.
I agree, and I will get with the director on that. I'll ask the secretary to write that down. Thank you.
Ray, can I make one more comment, please?
Sure you can.
And I know out of the, again, from the committee, I know out of the $62 million, the cumulative amount, obviously we're paying our design consultant, and that'll be a significant fee. But I'd also like to learn about what we owe to the Public Works Group, buildings and facilities people. I think we owe something on there. I don't know just what that is or how much that is, but I'm hoping I'm not surprised.
You'll be surprised.
So I'm putting it politely. There is a transfer of some.
You mean DAS, right?
Pardon?
Department of Administrative Services, Bureau of Public Works?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, there's considerable amount budgeted for them.
Yeah. And I don't know the formula, and I don't know if it means 3 million transferred over, or if it means 10 million. I don't have a clue, but I think the public needs to know, and we as a commission ought to know when you
Absolutely.
accumulate $62 million, how much is not even gonna go to the project because it's gonna go to an administrative fee that we.
Engineer fees.
Pardon?
Probably engineer.
It's engineering fees, and that's the only funding that so far has come out of the ARPA money anyway.
I think, anything else, Bruce? Please commit.
I'm done.
All right, thank you. Public engagement and education.
Today we met to start going over some of the award stuff, which we are not done, but we are aiming for a target of June still. I did want to bring a motion forward to the full commission to add a new award called the Commissioner Legacy Service Award. There's some discussion about some people who've been nominated over the years that don't necessarily fit correctly in some of the ways they've been nominated, and we think that this could be a good way to honor those people going forward. So I will make a motion to create the Commissioner Legacy and Service Award, which are for people that have showed service to the work that the Fish and Game Department does before being a commissioner, while being a commissioner, and after being a commissioner. And that's important that all of those things are present, so.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Discussion?
I have a question.
Okay.
If I recall, we have about 8 different award categories already.
We did.
So, while I appreciate you're trying to find the right fit, if we're adding one, is there something to remove? Because we keep getting this, but I don't think we actually even issue 8 a year. So I'd rather look at the whole totality of it instead of keep adding more, so that there's actually some meaning and value behind it, not everybody gets a trophy kind of.
I would agree with your sentiment that some may be removed. In this case, I would say to keep in a timeline, us getting this approval would be great, and I think our subcommittee could certainly look at potentially removing some going forward, if the rest of the commission trusts us to do those set of items. But from going over how some people and what I've heard from past award situations, this would relieve kind of the one outlier where, quite honestly, to your point, there are awards that are not going to get filled that wouldn't have been correct for somebody like this, and somebody who certainly does, deserve some recognition, if that makes sense. So yes, I agree with you, but I'm hoping that as a commission we can still move forward with at least adding this award to that.
So this award will strictly be for commissioners?
You can only be a commissioner, no, which I would assume we're not going to get a nominee every year for it either.
Any other discussion?
I've been quiet so far, so.
Enough for lost time.
Is there more criteria to share? Is there criteria for the others? Like, I feel like I've seen more of like a one-pager. What are the elements that satisfy?
I would say
this?
you're not that prepared, no. Our commission, I mean, I guess we could make that right now if the chair would allow me to move forward with doing that right now.
No.
No, I can't do that.
No, what?
He's not
If I
gonna-
believe what you're looking for, it's a person involved, and I don't want to jeopardize anything.
So I think relative to my last comment, I'm interested in the recommendation of the committee, and I appreciate that effort going into that. But I would, when called to a vote, I would oppose, and I would prefer to defer until you're able to outline more criteria of what that is, and then I would be happy to reevaluate that. That is my position.
We don't have to give all the awards every year.
Right, yep, I recognize that, thank you.
I just, as a member of the committee, we talked at this at great length, and I didn't want to add more awards either. But I think what we're looking for are awards that fit all the categories that come up. We get 3 people for this, none of them really apply. We moved guys around, people around to fit awards that really we felt were more appropriate. And we just feel like there are other awards that would fit a larger array of applicants. They don't necessarily fit here and there, but this would be perfect. We have a number, what is it, 8 now, 9 awards? We only have 4 or 5 applicants.
Yes, and there's a lot of awards that at times just nobody gets
Yeah,
chosen for it,
right.
nobody's nominated.
Last year we gave out 3.
Yep.
I don't care if there's 8, 9, 10 categories.
It helps the selection committee find the right fit.
Right.
And I think that that's what we learned today, was that people who were given exceptional service don't actually fit in any of the current categories, which was
Exactly.
actually the problem we ran into. And some of that was around the Ellis Hatch Award, which is very marine-centric in its nature, which then eliminates people that don't necessarily fall into that, which would have, if it wasn't that specific, made sense in this situation.
Any more discussion? All right, those in favor to create,
Commissioner Legacy and
you
Service
got
Award.
it, yeah, Commissioner Legacy Award. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Okay, motion is passed, with one Commissioner Hart's son. Everybody else is in. Opposed. Lakes Management Advisory Committee, anything to report, Susan?
Very briefly, we met by Zoom because that was the day of that last big snowstorm. We received an update from the assigned part-time staff at the DES, but our big issue we spent the most amount of time on is the DES staff made us aware that this committee used to have a full-time DES person up until 2011, and it's never been replaced. And so we have this statutory charge. I mean, you can go read the RSA of what CalMac does, but in no way can just getting a little part-time help from DES staff help us with full definition. So we voted to instruct the legislative committee to start pursuing that in the next biennium. So we'll work on that in the meantime, try to get that full-time position back so that the committee can meet its statutory charge. I mean, that's the end of it.
All right, thank you. Rivers Management Advisory Committee, Chris isn't here, he can catch up later. Is there any old business? Not hearing any new business. I have one thing to bring up on new business, but anybody else? Okay, under new business, I met with the director the other day prior to him getting sick, and I did not cause that. He and I discussed the next 3 months commission meetings, where they would be held. I do not have an agenda for which will be on those meetings, however, next month for April, here in Concord, mainly because of the rulemaking. May would be in Seabrook, June here in Concord. So that's for both for those locations for the next 3 months. Any, sorry, can I get a second?
Second.
Okay, discussion? Not hearing any, call for the vote. Those in favor of accepting April, May, and June's next commission meetings, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Yes.
I don't, yeah.
What?
Same place in Seabrook.
Yes. Kind of all-
That was a good place.
Commission reports.
I have one brief one.
I knew you would.
I'm out there, I'm doing commissioning, as Commissioner Stoll calls it. We have a search and rescue informational presentation scheduled at the Multboro Library at 6 p.m. on April 6th. Kim Lesniewski from Lakes Region Search and Rescue will be there. Officer Canfield will be there. And we're expecting the K-9 unit with Officer St. Pierre to attend. And so this will be a presentation on how the private-public partnership works when somebody calls for search and rescue, and it will also review tips on how not to need search and rescue. And we will be promoting the Hike Safe card quite well. Thank you.
Any other commissioners have a report? They're not having any. The director's report is not here, so,
Mr. Chair?
no?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Could I just add a comment?
Sure. Under commissioner reports?
Yeah, okay. Just wanted to report out that the old number 4 Fishing Game and Snowmobile Club come June 1st will be fully merged with Sullivan County Sportsman. And it will be under the name of Old Number 4 Fishing Game.
Okay, thank you, Bruce.
Two clubs into one.
Directors report, they'll be catching up, I guess, next month. Call to the public. Anybody have anything they'd like to say? Yes, ma'am. She doesn't have to stand.
Oh, that's all right.
Just give me a name and where you're from.
My name is Jean Slepian. I live in Stoddard. And I just wanted to ask something about, to follow up on Commissioner Stoll's report on the rulemaking process. Every time the commission initiates a rule, or whether that's through the biennial rulemaking or an independent rule, it has to go through a public process. And that includes a period of time for soliciting public comments. But a review of the last 5 years or so of the commission's minutes suggests that these public comments are often ignored. So what I'm asking you to do is to make a commitment to study and give consideration to the public's comments, because I believe you are, in some regards, supported by taxpayer dollars, and these are the taxpayers who are reaching out to you to give you this information. I can give you, let's all look back at the bobcat hunt, the proposed rule for the bobcat hunt. 6,000 public comments, 5,750 of those public comments were opposed, 250 were in support, and yet the commission voted in favor of the bobcat hunt. So I'm appealing to you. You ask the public for comments. Pay attention to what the public has to say. Thank you.
Thank you for your input. Anybody else? Welcome.
I'm Weldon Bosworth from Guilford, New Hampshire, and I'm with the New Hampshire Wildlife Coalition, which supports fair chase hunting. But I'd like to give you another perspective to what we heard in this very enthusiastic presentation from the gentleman from Vaughan. Fair chase hunting, as you all know, is hunting and taking of wild animals without an unfair or improper advantage. In other words, the quarry has a reasonable chance to escape, not 10%, 15%, but something higher than that, I think. Taking a look at the evolution of, let's say, the erosion of fair chase hunting, back in the day, that Commissioner DeRosa mentioned, people used both wood savvy and endurance to hunt and take game. They then learned to take dogs with them to assist them. But this was subsistence hunting. Hunting now, at least in our area here, is sort of a sport. And how it's being evolved, it goes from using VHF for locating to GPS. I suppose the next thing is armed drones, all in the favor of giving the humans an unfair advantage to the animals. I mean, just last year, Fish and Game supported a bill that basically proposed using live action game cameras. And I know there were some conditions on it where you couldn't go out and see it and run out and shoot it, but nonetheless, we're seeing a progression here of an erosion of fair chase. Taking the bears, for example, over 70% of the bears killed in this state are killed either as a result of hounding or following your dogs, or shooting bear over bait. 70%. Seems like a weird equation. In terms of when you can go after or hound animals, we have bears, which you have a training session of, I think it's 3 months, and then 6 weeks or so where you can go and actually complete the hunt. Coyotes, as we learned, it's all year round. Fox and fisher and raccoons, it's 7 months out of the year. And I'm just wondering, you know, these wildlife out there are basically being disturbed a good part of the year. I personally would like to think that the ecosystem would be a lot healthier if that weren't so. So, the only other thing I wanted to say is that the fact that those animals that are eventually, other than bear, that are taken or harvested by hounding, don't have to be reported in terms of how many there were or where they were taken. And I think that's sort of like taking cash out of the bank when you don't know how much is in it. So that's it. Thanks again.
All right, thank you. Anybody else?
May I make a comment?
All right.
About here.
Hold on. I'm on call to the public.
She can go back.
I would like you to go.
Okay. I will go.
You had your hand up first, I'm letting you go.
I'm Diane Richardson from Springfield.
Would you take the podium, please?
I can. Diane Richardson from Springfield. About a year and a half ago, I completed my 2-year quest to get a law passed that went into effect in January of last year that would add to the dog stealing statute, which is 46642A. And what we added was prohibiting the removal, tampering with, damage, or destroying a dog's collar or tracking device. It already said just a plain collar, but we added a tracking device to it. Most of the states that have that law in place, the Fish and Game Department puts out on their social media account a couple times a year, and it's in their rule book, that just to remind the public that that exists. Because there's a problem in New Hampshire and other states as well, where people wandering, you know, hiking or being home or whatever, a hunting dog or even a pet dog has a tracking collar now, a lot of them do, will show up and the people assume that they're hunting dogs and they want to save the hunting animals, so they take the collars off and they destroy them. Or they turn the collars off, or they pick the dogs up and they drive them to the other side of the state and they drop them off at a shelter over there so that the hunters can find them. And sometimes these are just pets, because pets now do have GPS collars. It would be really great if Fish and Game could do that and somehow put in the social media site or in the digest that that is the law. Because I've tried to go through the social media department via Facebook a couple times, and I think they think it's too controversial or something, but it is the law. And I spent 2 years trying to get that law passed. So it would be really great if Fish and Game could at least, you know, once a year put it out on social media so that that is the law.
I thank you, Diane. Your social media's here, right? Yeah. I thank you, Diane. Anybody else?
Excuse me, sorry.
I'm Joan O'Brien from Amherst, and I am commenting on behalf of Voices of Wildlife regarding the department's response to a rulemaking petition that the organization submitted. And Chairman Green was copied on the petition, and I think what we just learned from Commissioner Stoll's discussion of how things work, the rulemaking is lawmaking, so I'm assuming that all of the commissioners saw the petition and there was some sort of vote taken on it. The petition was specifically to amend FIS 303.06 by adding no coyote shall be taken with the use of dogs. We provided a number of reasons, well explained in our petition. I won't go into them because we're all familiar with these reasons: fair chase, cruelty. The letter we got a letter back denying the petition from Director Mason. It did not address any of the concerns that were laid out in the petition. The letter of response only cited a stable coyote population and pointed to similar harvest methods being used in other northeastern states. And I just wanted to put that out there on the record.
Thank you, John. Anybody else? Okay, not seeing any. And entertain a motion to adjourn.
May I have a
Or am I
comment?
missing something? I'm sorry.
Yeah, thank you. I like, Mr. Bosworth mentioned that 70%, what was it, 70% of the bears are taken by baiting and hounding?
Yeah.
Baiting is the number one.
By
far.
a long shot. yeah.
Followed by stalking, and less than 10% are taken by hounds.
Mhm.
And it's probably less than 5. I wasn't being rude looking at my phone. I was actually looking for the memo
It's
I
10,
had for the
it's
brain.
10%, 10 or 11%.
But it's very, the hounds are the least amount take bear, or used to take bear.
I agree with that completely, and there's 17 states out of 32 that allow hounding. So somewhere, the other states have found a way to manage the bear population and achieve the objectives testified to by Dan or Andy without hounding or baiting.
I just wanted to clarify the percentage that was put out there, because as we know with statistics, you can prove anything.
No, you can't, not if you do it right.
Okay, I've done that one. No other comments? Apparently I will entertain a motion.
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye. You're done. That's good.
Oh.